What if I told you your property tax bill could triple by 2026 and hardly anyone is talking about it? Sounds unbelievable, right? But buried deep in state legislation passed in 2024 are quiet reforms that could lead to massive tax hikes for millions of Australian property owners. Whether you own a family home, an investment property, or even a small business, you could be hit hard. And the worst part? Most people won't find out until the bill arrives. Why isn't this all over the news? Why are these changes flying under the radar? In this video, we'll uncover the 10 hidden reasons why property taxes are set to surge across Australia and why 2026 could be the tipping point for homeowners, renters, and investors alike. Stick around, because if you own property or plan to one day, this is the wake-up call you didn't know you needed. In 2024, while most Australians were focused on interest rates, inflation, and the rising cost of living, a major property tax reform quietly slipped through state parliaments. No big headlines, no fiery debates, just a low-profile legislative change with massive long-term consequences. These reforms were designed to restructure how property is taxed, especially the shift from stamp duty, a one-time cost when you buy a home, to annual land taxes. On the surface, it might sound like a fair idea, but here's the catch. The real financial hit doesn't kick in until 2026. Why the delay? Simple. Governments didn't want public backlash or political resistance. By pushing the full implementation date out 2 years, they gave people time to adjust, but without clearly explaining what's coming. And what's coming is this. For many property owners, especially those in high-growth suburbs, land tax bills could triple. Investors with multiple properties, retirees with long-held family homes, and even small business owners with commercial property are all in the firing line. Yet, because the changes were passed quietly and the full effect is delayed, most Australians still have no idea what's about to hit them. This isn't just about taxes, it's about transparency. Why were such significant reforms passed with so little public discussion? And more importantly, why hasn't anyone warned the people who will be most affected? As we move closer to 2026, this silent law could become a very loud problem for millions. Next, we'll look at how the removal of stamp duty offsets is setting the stage for a major cost explosion. For decades, stamp duty has been one of the biggest upfront costs when buying property in Australia, but recent reforms are flipping that system on its head. Several states, including New South Wales and Victoria, are now phasing in annual land tax systems to replace stamp duty, especially for first home buyers. At first glance, it sounds like a win. Why pay tens of thousands in one go when you could spread it out over time? But here's the catch. In the new system, there's no long-term cap on how much tax you could pay. And more importantly, the offsets and exemptions that previously helped reduce stamp duty costs are quietly being removed. These stamp duty offsets, like concessions for first home buyers, pensioners, or low-value properties, helped millions afford their homes. Without them, property owners are now exposed to higher, uncapped annual taxes based solely on land value. And as property values rise, so will those bills. What does this mean for you? If you purchased a home with the expectation of lower upfront costs and gradual increases, you could now be looking at annual land tax bills doubling or tripling by 2026, with no clear way out. Even worse, these changes apply retroactively in some cases. That means homeowners who opted into the new tax system in recent years may not have fully understood the long-term costs. The removal of offsets is a quiet but powerful shift in how property is taxed, and it's laying the foundation for a much heavier burden on everyday Australians. Up next, how the shift from one-time stamp duty to ongoing land tax is not as harmless as it sounds. On the surface, replacing stamp duty with an annual land tax might seem like a smart move. After all, stamp duty is a huge upfront cost that can set homebuyers back tens of thousands of dollars. Switching to a smaller yearly tax sounds more manageable, right? Not quite. This reform is being sold as a way to make homeownership more accessible, but what many people don't realize is that over time, land tax can end up costing much more, especially in high-growth areas where land values are climbing fast. Let's break it down. With stamp duty, you pay once when you buy, and that's it. But with land tax, you pay every single year, and it's based on the current value of your land, not what you originally paid for it. So if your suburb sees a jump in land values, your tax bill follows. And here's where it gets risky. There's no cap. Unlike stamp duty, which is predictable, land tax is subject to valuation spikes, policy changes, and even inflation. That means over 10 or 20 years, you could pay 2 or 3 times more than you ever would have under the old system. This change hits hardest for long-term homeowners, retirees, and investors. Even if you've paid off your mortgage, land tax keeps coming, and it doesn't care whether your income has changed. Governments love this model because it gives them a steady, growing revenue stream. But for everyday Australians, it's a ticking bomb that gets more expensive the longer you stay in your home. Next, we'll look at how rising property values are inflating land tax bills faster than anyone expected. We dig deep to uncover what others don't. So if this video made you think, tell us in the comments what surprised you the most. It's just one click to subscribe, but it means the world to us and helps us keep creating content that actually matters. If you think your property taxes will stay the same each year under the new land tax system, think again. One of the most overlooked dangers in this reform is how property revaluations can lead to unexpected and sharp increases in your annual tax bill. Under the old system, you paid stamp duty once based on your purchase price, but under the new annual land tax model, your bill is tied to the current value of your land, and as prices go up, so do your taxes. In cities like Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane, land values have surged dramatically over the past decade. Even regional areas are now seeing double-digit annual growth, driven by population booms and limited housing supply. That means what you paid for your land 5 years ago could be dramatically less than what it's valued at today. Here's the kicker. Property revaluations typically happen every 1 to 3 years, depending on your state. So even if you're not buying or selling, the value of your land is being reassessed and taxed on a regular basis. That creates a moving target, where your costs can climb year after year, even if your income doesn't. For investors with multiple properties or homeowners in gentrifying suburbs, this can turn into a financial squeeze, especially when paired with inflation, interest rate hikes, and rising living costs. In short, rising land values might look great on paper, but they come with a hidden price under this new tax system, a price many aren't ready for. Coming up next, why this reform, meant to tax the wealthy, is actually catching everyday Australians in its net. One of the biggest selling points behind the 2024 property tax reform was that it would make the rich pay their fair share. On paper, that sounds great, but in reality, this policy is hitting regular, hard-working Australians just as hard, if not harder. The idea was to target wealthy investors and high-value landowners, but thanks to rising land values, many ordinary homeowners now fall into the same tax brackets as multi-property investors did a few years ago. You might not feel wealthy, but if your land has appreciated significantly, the government sees you that way. Take suburban families who bought a modest home 10 or 15 years ago. Due to natural market growth, their land is now worth 2 or 3 times what they paid. Under the new model, they're taxed on the current value, not what they originally invested. And unlike wealthy investors, most of these families don't have spare income to cover the rising costs. This also impacts retirees, many of whom are asset-rich, cash-poor. Their homes have grown in value, but their incomes haven't. Now they face increasing land tax bills on properties they've lived in for decades. The reform also hits mom and dad investors, people who bought a second property as a retirement plan. They're now treated the same as large-scale property developers and face compounded tax bills across multiple properties. The result? A system that promised to be fair and progressive is quietly punishing middle-class Australians, many of whom are now struggling to stay afloat. Next, we'll break down how these rising costs are creating a ripple effect and driving rents even higher across the country. If you think this tax reform only affects property owners, think again. One of the most immediate and widespread consequences of rising land taxes is a sharp increase in rental prices, and it's already starting. Here's why. When property owners are hit with higher annual taxes, they don't just absorb the cost, they pass it on to renters. Investors in particular will adjust their rent prices to maintain profitability, especially if they own multiple properties and face compounded tax hikes across their portfolio. In high-demand areas, where tenants are already competing for limited housing, landlords can raise rents without fear of losing tenants. And with land values surging, especially in cities like Sydney, Melbourne, and even parts of regional Queensland, these tax hikes could add hundreds of dollars per month to rental prices by 2026. This could be devastating for low and middle-income renters, many of whom are already spending more than 30% of their income on housing, the threshold for housing stress. It also impacts small landlords, not just big investors. Mom and dad property owners trying to supplement retirement income may be forced to increase rents just to cover the higher land tax, even if they'd rather keep housing affordable. And it doesn't stop there. Rising rents also drive up costs for small businesses, who will either pay more for commercial space or pass that cost to consumers. So while this reform was meant to balance the system, it's likely to do the opposite, pushing renters further into crisis and making housing even less accessible. Up next, the group hit hardest by these reforms, retirees on fixed incomes, many of whom are now facing tax bills they never expected. For many older Australians, the family home is more than just a place to live. It's their main asset, their security, and often their retirement plan. But under the new property tax system coming in 2026, thousands of retirees may find themselves facing tax bills they simply can't afford. Here's the issue. Most retirees are on fixed incomes, either the age pension, superannuation, or limited savings. Their income stays the same year to year, but under this new system, their property tax doesn't. In fact, as land values rise, so do annual tax obligations. That means even retirees who've paid off their homes could be facing thousands of dollars per year in land tax, despite having no mortgage, no rental income, and no financial buffer. It's especially cruel for those who've lived in the same home for decades. In many areas, property values have doubled or tripled since the early 2000s. These homeowners are now asset-rich but cash-poor, and the government is taxing them like they're wealthy investors. Some may be forced to downsize earlier than planned, sell their homes, or take on reverse mortgages just to cover rising costs. Others may try to stay put and fall into financial hardship, choosing between basic expenses and their land tax bill. While some states have discussed deferrals or exemptions for pensioners, many of these programs are temporary, means-tested, or confusing to access. The bottom line? A tax system that doesn't consider income level or age will inevitably hurt those who can least afford it. Next, we'll look at how small businesses and commercial property owners are also feeling the pressure and what that means for the wider economy. It's not just homeowners who need to brace for impact. Commercial property owners and small business operators are also facing serious financial pressure from the 2026 property tax changes. Under the new system, commercial land is subject to the same revaluation-based annual land tax model. That means shops, offices, warehouses, and industrial properties, especially in high-demand areas, are seeing their land values spike, and with it, their yearly tax bills. For small businesses, this is a huge problem. Many operate on tight profit margins and are already struggling with rising costs across the board: utilities, wages, insurance, and materials. Now, with higher land taxes added to the list, they're left with two options: raise their prices or shut their doors. This also affects commercial landlords, many of whom lease space to small family-run businesses. As their land taxes rise, they'll likely pass those costs on to tenants, driving up rent in already competitive commercial markets. And in many cases, those extra costs trickle down to the customer, meaning you and I end up paying more at the checkout, the cafe, or the local service provider. Even worse, some business owners who also own their premises, a common strategy for long-term financial stability, are being hit from both sides: increased property taxes and reduced consumer spending due to inflation and cost of living pressures. This reform, while aimed at long-term revenue for the government, risks crushing the heart of local economies, the small business sector. Coming up next, why these changes are happening now and how state governments are using property tax reform to recover from the COVID-era financial fallout.
Let's be honest, governments don't make major tax changes for no reason. So why are state governments suddenly overhauling property taxes and shifting to an annual land tax model? The answer lies in two words: budget shortfalls. The COVID-19 pandemic devastated state revenues. Lockdowns shut down businesses, unemployment surged, and massive public spending was needed for health responses, stimulus packages, and economic support. As a result, state governments racked up billions in debt, and they're now under pressure to balance the books fast. But here's the issue: many traditional revenue sources, like stamp duty, are unreliable. Stamp duty only flows in when properties are bought and sold. During economic slowdowns, that revenue plummets. Annual land tax, on the other hand, is predictable. It brings in steady income every year, regardless of market activity. That's why governments are shifting toward it. It's a reliable cash flow stream, and it grows automatically as land values rise. While this might make sense from a budget perspective, the burden is being placed squarely on the public: homeowners, retirees, small business owners, and renters. It's a long-term revenue fix for the government, but a long-term financial strain for everyone else. What's worse, many of these changes were rolled out quietly, with little public consultation or understanding of their full impact. So next time you hear a politician talk about rebuilding the economy, remember, you might be footing the bill. Coming up next, the final reason why this reform is more dangerous than most realize: most Australians still don't know it's coming. Here's the most alarming part of this entire situation: millions of Australians have no idea these tax changes are about to hit them. The legislation was passed quietly. There were no major headlines, no public awareness campaigns, and no meaningful debate in mainstream media. In fact, many property owners won't realize anything has changed until 2026, when their first inflated land tax bill arrives in the mail. By then, it'll be too late to plan, too late to fight it, too late to protect your household budget. And it's not just homeowners who are in the dark. Renters, who will indirectly bear the burden of rising taxes through higher rents, also remain unaware of what's brewing behind the scenes. This silence isn't accidental. Governments benefit from confusion and low resistance. The slower and quieter the rollout, the less pushback they face. But the price of that silence is massive, and it's the public who will pay for it. What's even more concerning is that financial advisors, real estate agents, and even some property investors aren't fully across the long-term impact. That means even people who think they're informed might be caught off guard. This isn't fear-mongering, it's a wake-up call. Because when a law changes your financial future and no one tells you about it, that's not just poor communication, that's a systemic failure. So now that you know what's coming, what will you do about it? Stick around, because next we'll break down what you can do right now to prepare and protect yourself from the worst of what's coming in 2026. Now that you know what's coming, the most important question is, how can you protect yourself?
Here are real, practical steps you can take right now to prepare for the property tax changes in 2026. 1. Know your land valuation. Start by checking your land valuation notice from your state revenue office. This is the figure your future land tax will be based on. If you think it's incorrect or inflated, you may be able to challenge it, but only within a limited time. 2. Talk to a financial advisor or accountant. If you own multiple properties or you're nearing retirement, speak to a qualified financial professional about tax planning. You may need to reassess your portfolio or consider structuring your assets differently. 3. Research your state's exemptions and deferral schemes. Some states offer land tax concessions for pensioners, low-income earners, or certain types of property. Others allow deferral of payment. But many people don't even know these options exist. Do your homework and apply early if you're eligible. 4. Factor land tax into your budget. Start treating land tax like any other recurring expense. Set aside savings now or adjust your investment strategy to absorb rising costs before they hit hard. 5. Raise your voice. Contact your local MP, sign petitions, and support organizations pushing for fairer, more transparent tax policies. These changes slipped in quietly. Your voice can help ensure that doesn't happen again. The 2026 tax shift isn't just a financial issue, it's a planning issue. Be informed, be prepared, and most importantly, don't wait until it's too late. Up next, a powerful conclusion and CTA to tie it all together. If this video opened your eyes, drop a comment below and tell us, were you aware this law was even coming? We read every response. We pour countless hours into research to bring you the truth no one else is talking about. So if you found this valuable, please support us with a like, a share, and that one-click subscribe. Don't miss our previous video on Australia's housing crisis. It connects directly to what you've learned today. Your support keeps this channel going and helps more people wake up before it's too late.